So we're continuing the theme of going into the future here. And we've got a great group of panelists, starting with, all the way down at the end, with Joe Horwitz. Close? Okay, close, thank you. Who's Managing Director of the NFA. And you all know the NFA from Tom Sexton and Regina and what they were talking to us about. So Joe is Managing Director focused on regulatory matters related to futures and Forex activity, responsible for the oversight of the compliance department at the NFA, which includes managing the core functions: examination, risk assessment, investigation, fraud detection. And obviously crypto is probably a good part of that in terms of new and innovative things. Before being at the NFA, Joe was Executive Director at CME Group, Market Regulations, for 32 years. So we're delighted to have Joe with us. Then we have Jason Mahoney, who is Special Counsel in the Office of International Affairs. And we're really fortunate to have Jason, who focuses on cyber and crypto assets for us at the CFTC and all the international activities that are going on in that regard. Jason leads the IOSCO working group on cybersecurity. So while we're talking crypto, cyber, I guess it goes sort of hand in hand. But he's pretty much our tech guru, I guess, in OIA. Before joining the CFTC, Jason worked for corporate defense firms, including Hunton and Williams, and got your JD at the University of Pittsburgh. Go Steelers. And then next to me, you all know and recognize it, and sitting next to you guys for a long time now, is Simon O'Brien. I gotta find you right. There you are, Simon. I asked Simon actually volunteered. He volunteered to help us out, which is great. So Simon is Associate Director, Market Infrastructure and Products at Financial Services Regulatory Authority, which is part of Abu Dhabi Global Markets. Leads a team responsible for authorizing and supervising market infrastructure, including recognized investment exchanges, recognized clearinghouses, multilateral trading facilities, organized trading facilities, and crypto exchanges. And you formally have crypto exchanges. That's great. It just goes to show the innovation that we've got in this area. He's also responsible to recognize remote exchanges, remote clearinghouses, and remote members, meaning non-domestic. In your case, right? So Simon also leading projects, including their crypto asset regulatory framework, which he's going to tell us all about what they're doing there. And I think it's really great because from everything I can tell, you're probably the leaders right now coming out with actual regulation in the crypto area. So it'd be really interesting to hear what Simon's agency is doing in this regard. Prior to joining FSRA, Simon was senior management and technical expertise within Australia and UAE. So when he speaks, you can tell the Australian piece of it. But so let's get right in. We've got a couple of slide presentations to talk about it. Joe then is going to sort of talk about what NFA is going. But I think, Simon, you're going up first and telling us what you guys are doing over there in the UAE.
Thanks, Kevin. And yes, I have spent the last few days sitting with all of you out in the room. It's been a pleasure, and it's a pleasure to stand up at the invitation of the CFTC and present our framework to you. I'll tell you a story that makes me surprised that I'm standing up here in Washington talking about crypto assets. My first job was with ASIC 20 years ago in Australia, and my first project was, what is the internet and how do we regulate it? Hopefully in 20 years' time, I'm not asking what is blockchain and crypto assets and how do we regulate it. So I'll talk today about our crypto asset framework. I'll briefly touch on what Abu Dhabi Global Market is. Many of you will know, of course, the DFSA, the DIFC. We're very similar, and we have two financial free zones within the UAE. We are based in the capital. If you look down the very bottom of the screen there, a small island. So when you drive over the island, the onshore requirements, civil law, commercial law is applied, and we apply our new regulatory framework, our own court structure, our own legislative framework, etc. That gives us obviously great flexibility and the ability to draft relatively quickly new rules and requirements, for example, crypto asset rules. Broad-based global regulator. I raise this point. Much of the discussions, particularly today, are around what's a security, what's a commodity, what's a derivative. We can regulate all three of those activities in our jurisdiction as the FSRA, as a consolidated regulator. We do everything effectively apart from central bank requirements. That's still maintained onshore. Fintech's obviously a part of the journey. So where we got to crypto assets obviously started with fintech. So the last panel, the last session was very interesting for us to hear about what's occurring globally in terms of sandboxes, etc. We've obviously got our own sandbox. We've established those bilateral bridges that people talk about, and trying to tailor, for example, a regulatory regime to allow VC capital raising for fintech firms. Very, very important part of our journey. Digital assets. So what we did is probably a little bit different to what many other jurisdictions have done. So everything in that red box is something that can be currently regulated with inside Abu Dhabi Global Market. So we have the concept of digital assets, security tokens, what people will call ICO security tokens, etc. Are caught within our regime. Derivatives and funds over those are also now caught within our regime. And as of 25th of June of this year, crypto assets are caught. We're not intending to capture everything, so some jurisdictions will call things like utility tokens. They are still not caught within our regime. But we did come up with a concept which has been quite useful in our jurisdiction of digital assets to form and allow our thinking around the development of the regime. Clearly, we have not used the word currencies. Cryptocurrencies as an issue of context, particularly around banking. So we're focused on calling things digital assets. 12 months ago, we released some guidance that talked about ICO, security tokens, crypto assets generally. We were the first in the Middle East, North African region to talk about ICOs, how they could be regulated within our jurisdiction. To put it simply, if it's a piece of paper that's if it's a certificated version of a share, if it's a digital version, a crypto version, a tokenized version, it's still a share, for example, they'll be regulated as a share in our jurisdiction. We recognise the value of the capital raising functionality of that, and we'll focus on the financial services and utility around that. We also adopted a technology neutral approach. So some jurisdictions are focusing on how to regulate the technology. We're very much focused on how to regulate the financial service activity related to the use of such technology. We clarified our approach to securities. We have to deem them a security in our jurisdiction. And we also, at that time, called crypto assets, so Bitcoin, Ethereum, Ether, Ripple, or XRP, were deemed as commodities. So at that time, we took a similar view to the CFTC in terms of treating this form of asset class as a commodity in our jurisdiction. At that time, it was not caught. So we had to work out, because of demand that was coming, how to regulate it. On the back of that guidance, we saw two things happen. The first were the derivatives markets. So we worked with, over the last 12 months, two crypto futures markets, very similar to CBO ECME that we saw yesterday, approach us and are building out now a full exchange and clearinghouse to operate a capital market for futures over crypto assets. That includes, importantly, the clearinghouse side of things. So the discussions we saw the other day, the CFTC itself was talking about issues around clearing. We're also finding those issues around is the central clearing by members, etc. Are real key issues for us at the moment as well. We also saw funds. So if you look at what's happening in the US, the SEC is looking a lot in terms of ETFs, funds, etc. We look at what a lot of colleagues in the room have done in terms of restricting around retail funds. We agree with that position at the moment, and it's at the moment only for qualified investor funds can invest in crypto assets. But as of June this year, we have our first fund managers that have invested into crypto assets. And finally, we've used our RegLab to build out and